Hi, my name is Trainmaster04 and today I've got yet another beautiful model to show you, and this time it is Lionel's latest rendition of a Santa Fe Northern, but in the iconic Santa Fe Blue Goose paint scheme. So sit back and relax and enjoy the show.
Union Pacific 4014. Do you read me? Over. Roger that. Union Pacific 4014. I read you. Over. Start up and stand by. Over. Yes, sir. Start up and stand by.
To start this video off, let me go ahead and give a brief history lesson over the real number 3765 and also a brief history over the iconic Santa Fe Blue Goose. Santa Fe engine number 3765 is a northern type steam locomotive, which means she has a 4/8 four-wheel arrangement underneath her boiler. Originally, she was built in 1938 by the Baldwin Locomotive Works and became the first of her class, which numbered 3765 through 3775. Now, at a first glance, you may actually think that 3765 and all of her sisters are actually identical or the same type of class to the predecessor 3751 class. And yes, you would actually be correct in the sense of both classes being very identical, but there is actually one minute detail that separates both classes, and that being boiler pressure. For example, the 3751 class had a maximum boiler pressure of 230 psi, whereas the 3765 class had a maximum boiler pressure of 300 psi, which as a result resulted in the 3765 class being more efficient and a lot faster compared to their predecessor, the 3751 class. Now, once these locomotives were put on the Santa Fe roster, these locomotives were put through their paces by operating on high-speed crack passenger trains such as the Chief as well as the Fast Mail Express, which ran through La Junta, Colorado and Los Angeles, California. As time moved on, 3765 as well as all of her sisters were put through their paces along the Santa Fe route and eventually soon reached the point of World War II where they endured even more heavy, fast passenger trains as well as a few occasional freight services. But sadly, like most other railroads, as well as the steam era in general, it soon came to an abrupt close in the year 1959 when she and her sisters were retired due to dieselization. Now, by this point in time, you may think that the history lesson is actually over, but instead, 3765 in particular still has a little bit more history up her sleeve. And that being the paint scheme. The history behind this beautiful paint scheme dates back to the year 1937 when the Santa Fe Railroad received their first as well as their only streamlined Hudson-type steam locomotive numbered 3460. Now, besides the locomotive being plated in futuristic streamlining, the locomotive was also painted in this beautiful two-tone robin egg blue and then also had some stainless steel accents along the side of it. Now, for revenue services, the locomotive was primarily used for promotional purposes along the Santa Fe route, but soon, even then, that type of usage soon was subsided to dieselization. As a result, she was retired in 1956, as stated, due to dieselization, and was sadly scrapped, even though she was such a key component to the promotional purposes of the Santa Fe Railroad. Now, you may be wondering, why in the world am I even mentioning this engine number 3460, and how does it actually be connected to engine number 3765? Well, something that I did not mention in the previous two segments about engine number 3765 is that she was actually painted in Santa Fe's standard black paint scheme and given the standard silver or whitish numbering and lettering. But one interesting feature or interesting fact that this particular locomotive had was in its planning of its design. For example, before 3765 was actually designed as well as built, she was actually planned out to be painted in this gorgeous two-tone blue or Blue Goose paint scheme and have similar stainless steel accents but not be streamlined similar to engine number 3460. But sadly, before she was actually delivered, the plans for her to be painted in this beautiful paint scheme was soon scrapped, but since it was such a last-minute decision, the Baldwin Locomotive Works still gave her a different type of pilot and also stainless steel accents such as the handrails going along the side of the boilers. So, in other words, 3765 is more of a close but no cigar situation in the sense of becoming a beautiful painted locomotive. Now that you have a better understanding behind the history of engine number 3765 and also the paint scheme, let me now go ahead and move on to some of the stats and facts of the model itself. This model was recently released in Lionel's 2019 Volume 2 catalog and soon starts showing up in hobby shops as well as front porches around June of 2020. For the measurements, both the locomotive and tender have a combined length of about 27¼ inches, and as a result, Lionel rates this locomotive to have a minimum curve radius of 0.54. Under the hood, this locomotive is powered by one large flywheeled motor and is also equipped with two fan-driven smoke units, one being for the main smokestack and then the other for the whistle steam smoke effect towards the middle of the boiler. For the sound system, this locomotive has the Lionel Legacy Rail Sound System, and in order to produce all that sound, this locomotive has two loud speakers located within the tender. For the methods of operation, this locomotive is equipped to have at least 4 different methods of operation. For example, the first and preferred method is using Lionel's Legacy Command System, or otherwise known as Cab 2, the second being Lionel's TMCC or Cab 1 command system, the third being Lionel's Bluetooth command system, which you can use any smart device through their Bluetooth app. And then finally, the third and simplest method is by conventional, where you just take your locomotive, set it on a loop of track, and then power it up with a transformer. Now that you have a better understanding on what type of features this locomotive has to offer, let me now go ahead, take a closer look, and show you all of the wonderful details, as well as take a closer look at the beautiful paint scheme on this model. Starting on down at the pilot area of the locomotive, here you can see we have a nicely painted cowcatcher in that dark two-tone blue, and is also pinstriped in that beautiful silver paint scheme. Looking on either side of it, here you can see we have 2 separately applied steps, and then right in the middle we have 2 separately applied brake hose detailing with red painted tips, and then right in the middle a scale dummy coupler. Moving on up, here you can see we have a separately applied and movable coupler cup bar, which does have a separately applied chain, which does go through the scale dummy coupler. Moving above, here you can see we also have a separately applied grab iron and then the shielding for the air compressors. Now, as you can see, the shielding is painted in that lighter robin egg blue and has a few little bits of detail here and there. For example, right in the middle we have a Santa Fe logo, which is prototypical on the original 3460. On either side, here we have 2 molded in grab irons, and then right in the middle we've got a few various separately applied details such as air compressors on either side, and then a few bits here in the middle. Moving on up to the smoke box area of the locomotive, here you can see on either side of it we have 2 stainless steel grab irons going along the length of the boiler, and then right in the middle we've got the smoke box door itself with a separately applied headlamp with a number board underneath it which reads number 3765. Above that we have a brass separately applied bell which does have a lanyard and also goes to the back of the cab. On either side of the bell, here we have 2 separately applied marker lights, which do come on when the locomotive's in operation. And then finally, coming back to the smoke box, as always, the smoke box door itself does swing open and close. Moving on over to the engineer side of the boiler, starting at the bottom, working up to the top, here you can see right down below we have a set of pilot wheels as well as one of the 2 sets of cylinders for this locomotive, and as you can see they are both painted in that beautiful darker toned robin egg blue and also is pinstriped with that beautiful silver paint. Moving on up towards the cylinder area, here you can see there's a whole lot of details such as separately applied pipework going above and on the cylinders, some nicely silvered or polished side rod action as well as some valve gear, and then also some molded in rivet detailing on the sides of the cylinders themselves. Moving on up from the cylinders, here you can see we have the beginning of the running boards as well as a nice set of separately applied steps going up to the running boards, and as you can see they are spotlessly painted in that beautiful stainless steel silver. And then finally coming up towards the side of the smoke box area, here you can see we have a stainless steel separately applied handrail as well as a few other details, such as some boiler bands, these 3 molded in steps going up to the main smokestack, and then also these 2 separately applied and legible builder's plates right on the side of the smoke box. Continuing down the side of the locomotive, starting at the bottom working up to the top, here you can see we have the nicely detailed and beautifully painted set of 8 driving wheels and also the beautiful stainless steel side rods. Now as you can see, the centers of the drivers are painted in that darker robin egg blue and also are outlined or white-walled in that beautiful silver or stainless steel paint. Moving on up, here you can see we have some more separately applied detail that are a little bit more familiar, such as the continuation of the running boards, as well as the continuation of that separately applied pipework that I showed you over the top of the cylinders. Now, there's also some other little bits and details here and there, such as a separately applied air tank reservoir and also a separately applied valve gear assembly. Now, moving on up above the running boards on the side of the boiler itself, here you can see there is still a whole lot more detail, such as the continuation of that stainless steel handrail, some separately applied pipework going off of the sand dome, straddling around the side of the boiler, and a few other bits here and there. Now, and then finally, here you can see we have a separately applied brass hand-painted whistle, and as stated earlier, this locomotive is equipped with the whistle steam smoke effect, so when the locomotive is in operation and you blow the whistle, you should see a stream of smoke coming out behind the whistle. Finally, here is a quick look at the firebox and cab area. So, starting at the bottom, here you can see we have a nicely detailed trailing truck, and for a change we have some white-walled wheels instead of some silver-walled wheels. Moving on up, here you can see we have a nicely detailed and pretty large firebox for this locomotive, and also as you can see there is a whole lot of pipework going around it, both separately applied and molded in. Moving on up, here you can see we have the termination of the running board and also some molded in steps going along underneath it as well as underneath the cab. Looking up on the boiler, here you can see we have some more separately applied detail, such as these 2 little steps, and also some separately applied pipework going underneath or through the running boards, and also the termination of both the throttle linkage and that beautiful stainless steel handrail. And then finally, here we come to the side of the cab, which also has a whole lot of detail. For example, right at the front we have a clear plastic insert as well as a window silhouette, and also 2 other windows on the side, which, similar to the front window, also has 2 clear plastic inserts, and the window towards the rear does slide open and close. Now, for the sense of paint scheme and detail, as you can see, there is a whole lot of molded in rivet detailing, a separately applied grab iron, a molded in awning, and also a molded in ledge underneath or right beside the rear window. Now for the paint scheme, as you can see, primarily the side of the cab is painted in that lighter toned blue, has a silver stripe along the middle with a clear and crisp number 3765, and also a little itty bitty stripe underneath the silver stripe in that beautiful darker toned blue. Moving on around to the rear of the locomotive, starting at the bottom working up to the top, here you can see we have the wireless drawbar for the locomotive, which sends signals between the locomotive and the tender via this infrared sensor. Moving on up, here you can see we have the archway and the entrance into the cab, and as you can see, it has a whole lot of detail, such as these 2 separately applied grab irons, some rivet detailing, 2 molded in windows with clear plastic inserts, and is also nicely painted in that 2-tone blue with that center silver stripe. And then finally, looking inside the cab itself, as you can see, there are 2 hand-painted crew figures, one on the fireman side, one on the engineer side. And then looking at the back head itself, as you can see, it is nicely detailed with a whole bunch of hand-painted gauges and knobs, as well as a few pipework in between. Here is a quick look at the fireman side of the locomotive, and as you can see, it is primarily the same compared to the other side, or the engineer side of the locomotive, but there are a few minute differences in the sense of details. Such as, here is a separately applied pipe coming down off the steam dome, there is a molded in toolbox right here, and also now you can actually get to see the lead going off of the hand-painted bell going back into the cab. Finally, here is a quick look at the top part of the boiler. Starting at the right and working to the left, here you can see we have a molded in super feed water heater, as well as the main smokestack. Now, as stated earlier on in this video, this locomotive is equipped with 2 smoke units, one for the main smokestack and then one for the smoking whistle towards the middle of the boiler. Now, in order to actually fill the smoke unit up at the main smokestack, you just take your smoke fluid and pour it directly down the stack. Now, one interesting feature about this smokestack is that it is actually interchangeable. Included with this model, there are 3 stacks in total, one being this default short stack, and then the other 2 having a little bit more interesting. one being an extending stack that goes up and down, and then another curved smokestack that directs the smoke going towards along the side of the boiler. Moving on over, here you can see we have a molded in boiler patch and also some more detail that I've shown you earlier, such as this pipework and also these two number boards on either side of the boiler. Moving towards the middle, here you can see we have the sand dome for the locomotive, which has a few little bits of details, such as these molded in hatches and then these two separately applied grab irons. Now, one interesting feature about this sand dome, besides its aesthetic appeal, underneath it actually contains all of the switches necessary for operating this locomotive, such as the run program switch, the smoke units on and off switch, the Bluetooth on and off switch, and then finally the on and off switch for the Odyssey speed control. Moving on over, here you can see we have, yet again, that hand-painted, separately applied whistle, and as you can see, there's a little hole right behind it, and in order to actually fill the smoke unit for the smoking whistle, you actually have to take off the steam dome, which is nearby, and fill the smoke unit directly down the little hole underneath the top of the dome. Moving towards the middle, here you can see we have a set of hand-painted and separately applied pop-off valves, and also towards the back, a few other little bits and details, such as a dynamo generator, some more pipe work, and then finally right at the top of the cab, or the roof, here you can see we have some rivet detailing and two separately applied hatches that can open and close. Now that you've seen all of the wonderful detail and the beautiful paint scheme on the locomotive, let me now go ahead and move on to the tender and show you that same amount of detail as well as the continuation of the beautiful Blue Goose paint scheme. Starting at the front of the tender, looking down below, here you can see we have the tender's end for the wireless straw bar, and on either side of it, two molded in steps leading up to the molded in tender deck. Now in between the frame as well as the tender deck, here you can see we have a molded in air reservoir, and then finally coming up towards the front plate of the tender itself, here you can see there is yet even more detail, such as these two separately applied stainless steel grab irons, a molded in sandbox, and other separately applied and molded in pieces here and there. Now for the paint scheme, as you can see, similar to the back of the cab, the striping, for example the silver, lighter and darker robin egg blue, continues right along the front of the tender. Moving on around to the engineer side of the tender, and right off the bat, as you can see, the beautiful Blue Goose paint scheme wraps around the side of the tender instead of staying at either end. Now, besides the paint scheme, there are a few little bits and pieces here and there that gives it a little bit more pizzazz in the sense of detail. For example, here right in the center of the silver stripe, we have a black Santa Fe type, and also a whole bunch of rivet detailing along the side of the panel. Moving down here you can see we have a legible separately applied tender plate, and right underneath the frame we have a molded in toolbox and also two sets of darker blue painted trucks with white walled wheels. Looking at the back of the tender, starting at the bottom working up to the top, here you can see right in the middle we have the electrocoupler for the locomotive, which can be thrown by either using Lionel's Legacy, Team CC, or Bluetooth command systems. Now on either side of it, here you can see we have two separately applied ladder stanchions going up to the rear tender deck, which as you can see has a little bit of molded in detail. Now speaking of detail, moving on up, here we have the back of the tender plate, and as you can see it is nicely painted in both of that robin egg blue and that silver stripe, and also has a little bit of font type right behind a little bit of detail. Now, speaking of detail, as you can also see, there is a whole lot of it. For example, on either side of the tender plate, here you can see we have two separately applied grab irons. In the middle, a separately applied ladder, a whole lot of rivet detailing along the back of it, and then finally right up top, here we have a molded in reverse light, which does come on when the locomotive is in operation and put into reverse. Finally, here is a quick look at the top part of the tender, and as you can see, instead of it actually being a coal tender, it is instead an oil tender, which means instead of there being a coal load in this general area, instead there's just a whole lot of bits of detail here and there. So, speaking of detail, let's start at the right and work on to the left. Starting right here you can see we have two separately applied grab irons, a separately applied pipework hidden right behind here, and a few molded in bits here and there. Moving over towards the middle, here you can see we have two molded in hatches, which are meant to be for the oil, and sadly, this model for these particular two hatches do not open. Moving on over to the left, here you can see we have yet another separately applied grab iron, as well as 2 separately applied toolboxes. And then finally coming towards the end, here you can see we have yet some more hatches, and in this case, they do open, and also this last hatch actually contains the master volume control knob for the speaker inside the tender. Now that you've seen both the locomotive and tender, let me now go ahead, fire up the locomotive, and show you all of the wonderful sound features that this locomotive has to offer.
This is the dispatcher. Do you copy? I copy that. Over. Please start up and stand by. Over. Yes, sir. Start up and stand by. Out.
Alrighty, now that the locomotive is fired up, producing smoke out of the stack, let me now go ahead and give you a sampling of some of these sound features that are equipped with this beautiful model. So, first off, here is a sampling of the quillable whistle. Next, here's the bell. The steam blowdown sound. The water and oil fill-up sound.
My water's full. Over. Roger that. Out. My oil's full. Over. Acknowledged. Out.
And then finally, here is a sampling of some of the crew talk sounds that are equipped with this locomotive.
Dispatcher, am I cleared to the outbound? Over. Roger that. Take the green. Over. Acknowledged. I've got clear boards. Out. This is the dispatcher. Hold your position. Over. Roger. Standing by. Out. Dispatcher here. You're cleared outbound. Over. Copy that. We have a clear signal. Out. Tower, my water's full. Am I cleared to the outbound? Over. Roger, your track is clear. Dispatcher, over. Thank you much. Cleared outbound. Out.
Alrighty, I got some reefers and passenger cars hooked up to the locomotive. We've been given the green, so let's highball it all the way with Santa Fe.
Tower, train is outbound. Over. Roger that. Have a good run. Out.
that about wraps up this product review, but before I go, let me now go ahead and actually answer the two questions that I normally answer around this time, and they are, what is the original MSRP prices for one of these wonderful models, and then also, what is my personal opinion about it? Well, to start off, the original MSRP price from Lionel is right at $1,600. Now, if you're actually interested in purchasing one of these locomotives, you might be able to actually get a better deal by going on to two of my favorite store websites, them being trainworld.com or even Charles Rowe, where they might actually be able to give you a better deal than actually buying them directly through Lionel Trains. Now that you know what the original MSRP price is for one of these locomotives, let me now go ahead and move on to the second question, which is, what is my personal opinion about this model? Well, in short, I am very pleased with the outcome of this beautiful model. The paint scheme is extremely stunning, the performance is phenomenal as I've shown you, and even the smoke units produce an extremely large amount of smoke that I've even had to actually turn down the smoke unit in order to actually breathe down in my basement. Now, though this locomotive could be considered as a what-if paint scheme in the sense that the Blue Goose paint scheme was never on a Northern, though I would still consider it as an historical masterpiece in the sense that, really, as stated in the historical segment, this particular Northern type steam locomotive was going to be painted in the Blue Goose, and with the follow-up of the Lionel model, I think it would be a great addition to anybody's layout who wants something that is a little bit more interesting, that has in the sense of having a Santa Fe railroad, such as the Santa Fe Blue Goose in O gauge, besides having the MTH model. Now, besides it being a wonderful paint scheme as well as a wonderful performer, I would also suggest this to anybody who's looking for a colorful locomotive or even just a plain old Lionel Northern type steam locomotive just to run around your layout. Well, that wraps up this video, but before you go, I just want to say thank you very much for actually clicking on this video and also actually watching it to the very end. Now, if you actually want to see more of my videos and also support my channel, please do click on that subscribe button because then you will no longer miss any of the future videos that I produce. Also, if you've actually enjoyed this video, please do click on that like button because that lets me know that you actually enjoy the type of content that I produce and also lets YouTube know that this video and of the many other videos that I've produced are actually worth something. But anyway, my name is TreyMaster04 and I'll be seeing you next time. Well, that wraps up this video, but before you go, I just want to say thank you very much for actually clicking on this video and also actually watching it to the very end. Now, if you actually want to see more of my videos and also support my channel, please do click on that subscribe button because then you will no longer miss any of the future videos that I produce. Also, if you've actually enjoyed this video, please do click on that like button because that lets me know that you actually enjoy the type of content that I produce and also lets YouTube know that this video and of the many other videos that I've produced are actually worth something. But anyway, my name is TreyMaster04 and I'll be seeing you next time.